Welcome, everybody. My name is Robert Baer. I'm the Vice President and co-founder of Spiritual Awakenings International. And it's my pleasure today to introduce our next conference speaker, Dr. Yvonne Kason. And just to give a brief bio of her, it's very difficult because it's really extensive of what she's done and accomplished. And if you look at our Spiritual Awakenings International website, you'll notice there's something called the Circle of Honor. These are for people that are pioneering in this line of work and in this field. And we're fortunate we have 4 of those persons speaking at this conference. And one of them is Dr. Yvonne Kason. She's the president and co-founder of Spiritual Awakenings International. She's a family physician and a transpersonal psychotherapist. She's an author. 3 of her books off the top of my head: Touched by the Light, Soul Lessons from the Light, and A Farther Shore are 3 of her books. And she coined the phrase Spiritually Transformative Experiences, STEs. And please welcome Dr. Yvonne Kason.
Thank you, Robert. It's really my pleasure to be speaking to all of you today. I will be talking to you today about purifying the heart, 5 key stages of spiritual awakening. And what I'm going to be talking about today is available in my book, Soul Lessons from the Light. So in chapter 19, if after today is over or you want to read more, that's where you can find more details. So how did I get interested in different stages in spiritual awakening? Well, that happened to me because, as some of you who've heard me speak before or read my books may realize, that I've had been having near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences my entire life. And over the course of my life with these 5 NDEs and multiple STEs, I found that they were changing me, but in different ways over the years. And that it seemed that I was going through very definite spiritual life stages. Now, this all sort of started noticeably happening to me with my first powerful adult STE, which was a Kundalini awakening that I had in medical school when I was 23 years old. And I'm going to be telling all my STE stories briefly, just to highlight some of the key points and how they changed me. If you want more details, in some of my other presentations, I've gone into them in more detail. And of course, in my books, I go into them in a lot more detail, particularly in Soul Lessons from the Light, my most recent book. But at the age of 23, when I started meditating in my last year of medical school, I had this powerful experience where I felt this rush of energy come rushing up my spine. I heard a loud inner roaring sound, like the roar of a waterfalls, and my consciousness rose up above my body and expanded, and I felt this incredible expansion and love. I didn't realize for many years, I never even had a word to describe this experience, but I now realize it was a Kundalini awakening. But then a few years later, when I was 26, I was involved in another powerful experience, which was a near-death experience that I had in a medevac plane crash. When I was a young doctor as accompanying a critically ill Native Indian woman, our plane flew into bad weather. It was a small twin-engine aircraft like this, and it crashed into a semi-frozen lake and sank. And I had to swim to shore through semi-frozen water in a strong current. And when I was swimming to shore, I went out of body into what we now know is a near-death experience. But back then, I didn't even have a word to describe it. But it was most peculiar, and some of our NDE experiencers this morning talked about this, but it was actually like my consciousness was 2 places at the same time. A part of my consciousness was still in my physical body that was desperately struggling to swim to shore and not to drown. But the bulk of my consciousness rose up out of my body, and I rose into this place that was filled with light and filled with love. And I felt this profound, intense, unconditional love, which I instantly recognized, my soul instantly knew that what I was experiencing was the love of the higher power. I felt like I was home. But at this, I had been raised in my Christian upbringing to call the higher power God. But what I was experiencing God to be in my actual experience was nothing like what I had been taught in the church. It wasn't an old man with a long white beard sitting on a throne. No, it was this incredible force field of unconditional love, infinite intelligence, embracing all of creation, past, present, and future. Profound, beautiful experience. And I got sucked into my body like a genie being sucked into a bottle when my body was physically rescued and I was reheated and resuscitated. But this plane crash near-death experience changed me, and it changed me very dramatically. And I think many people I've observed are changed similarly by their near-death experiences. And this is launching us into a new stage in our spiritual transformation process. But I'm going to start by just telling you how it changed me. First off, my spiritual focus dramatically increased. I mean, I came home and I started reading that Bible intensely, avidly. It was like I had a hunger, a thirst to read the Bible. I had been told when I was younger, you should read the Bible. But to tell you the truth, I never had, other than the Psalms and maybe the 10 Commandments and a little bit about Jesus' birth. But other than that, I'd never studied the Bible. After this near-death experience, it was like I wanted to read it. I wanted to understand it. I traveled with the Bible. I wanted to read it every day. And I also felt filled with love. It was like some of that love that I felt on the other side came back with me, that I was like bubbling with love. And I had a new, greater capacity for forgiveness and a greater clarity about how important love really is in all of our relationship. Other things are trivial in comparison. I completely lost my fear of death. I knew that I and everyone else will live on after our physical bodies die. And I also became much more tolerant of people with diverse spiritual views. I realized we were all trying to understand the same one truth, like trying to climb the mountain from a whole bunch of different angles, that we have different perspectives depending on the angle we're climbing from and how far we are up the mountain. But once we get to the top, it's that same one loving, intelligent power behind the universe that we're all trying to grasp and commune with. So this experience launched me on a quest. I now had like a personal spiritual quest, trying to understand these experiences that had happened to me. On the outside, I was a Western trained medical doctor and I had a teaching position at the University of Toronto, practiced medicine. That was the outside. But on the inside, in the closet, I was on this quest. I started with reading the Bible avidly, like I told you, but then I started researching all sorts of other sources. I started reading from other spiritual traditions, from other mystical traditions about the lives of mystics, the lives of saints. I started reading in parapsychology and transpersonal psychology and even traditional psychiatry and psychology, like Jung, believe it or not, wrote about spiritual experiences. And then an interesting thing started happening is that more and more patients started telling me their own stories of their own STEs. So I was really on a quest to learn and to understand, what are these experiences? And what I want to highlight what some of the best answers that I was able to find were. And one was when I was introduced to the writings of Pandit Gopi Krishna, who wrote about Kundalini awakening. I actually had the opportunity to travel to India and meet him in 1977. He became a mentor to me and encouraged me to do Kundalini research. And I read all of his 17 books, and I found that the yogic model of spiritual transformation of consciousness and Kundalini awakening resonated with me as truth, and also seemed to resonate with the actual experiences that I was having. Because after my Kundalini awakening and NDE, I started having all kinds of STEs. I also found that the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali were a very important source of wisdom for me, that I read many different interpretations of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And what I found really spoke to me was he has one chapter in the Yoga Sutras, which, by the way, is hundreds of years old, where he talks about the different types of experiences of consciousness that one might have when one is going through a spiritual awakening process. And these were STEs. He was using different words for it, but he was describing STEs, and I resonated with them. I recognized them because I was experiencing them, and my patients were telling me they were experiencing them. And then I also got introduced to Paramahansa Yogananda. And he also wrote 17 books. And it's through the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, and also by my adopting his particular path of spiritual practices, Kriya Yoga, that I came to an even deeper experiential understanding, as well as conceptual understanding about spiritual transformation of consciousness. So then something interesting happened when I was 37. So this was now almost 10, 12 years later. I had a profound experience when I was walking on the sand dunes in Monterey, California, at a conference that was being held there on Kundalini Awakening by ITP and the Spiritual Emergence Network. And I'm just going to tell you the highlights just to save time for the latter part of my presentation. But I was very, very moved while I was there at that conference. A close friend, Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, and I had decided that we would throw open an invitation in case there were any experiencers who came to this conference, if they wanted to share with us in confidentiality, that we would have like a sharing circle. So this was our first experiencer sharing circle. This happened in 1990. And I was blown away, as was Bonnie, at how many people showed up. So Bonnie took one group, I took the other group, and people were so grateful. People were in tears. People were hugging me. They were so grateful to finally find a medical doctor, someone with an MD after their name, who would hear the stories of their diverse types of STEs or Kundalini awakenings, near-death experience, whatever it was, and not immediately label them as crazy. That I understood both professionally and experientially that these experiences were real, that it was not a sign of mental illness. It was part of a spiritual awakening process. And I was really, really moved by this. I was walking on the sand dunes, and all of a sudden I had this experience. It was like my head catapulted right open from above. And where my head used to be became like a lighthouse beacon of light. I couldn't find an accurate portrayal. Imagine that beacon of light in this image is 100 times that size. It was like where my head used to be became this sphere of light that was radiating brilliant light in all directions. And while I was in this state of illuminating light, it was revealed to me, not through words being spoken, but suddenly I just knew that I was being called by spirit, and that it was time for me to come out of the closet. And it was time for me to share what I had learned with others, and to be an advocate for experiencers, because experiencers were being harmed by the medical profession, by churches, by their family and relatives, by being labeled as crazy or a sign of mental illness. So this experience changed me again, but it changed me in a very different way from that plane crash near-death experience. This experience was a call to service. It was a call to action. No more of this in the closet researching stuff. No, this was time to come out and time to be of service, time to be of action. And so I did. I came out of the closet in 1990. I became the first Canadian medical doctor to specialize in researching and counseling patients with diverse types of spiritually transformative experiences. I co-founded the Kundalini Research Network. I became the Canadian coordinator of the Spiritual Emergence Network. And later on, I started writing books on STEs. But then, Little did I know that 5 years later, Spirit had other plans for me that launched me into yet another spiritual stage. So in 1995, at this time, I was 42 years old. I was in another near-miss plane incident, and I immediately went out of body, and I went into this vast expanse of dark blue colored space. I was rushing upwards towards the light. I had a life review that I seemed to be skipping through time and re-experiencing peak spiritual experiences in my life. And then all of a sudden, my path was blocked by this incredibly beautiful, luminescent being of light that looked like some sort of spiritual archetype. And it telepathically communicated to me, it is not your time. And then, boom, suddenly I'm back in my body again. Now, this near-death experience changed me again, but it changed me in a different way from those other two experiences that I mentioned changed me. After this near-death experience, I stayed in a state of ongoing mystical communion for 2 months afterwards. I was doing my daily function, looking after my son, driving my car, doing my grocery shopping, going to the office, counseling patients, all while this incredibly blessed unitive state of consciousness. But after gradually, as the time went on, it became more and more difficult for me to sustain that unitive state of consciousness. I would have to meditate, put my focus here on my third eye center, and then I could draw myself back into that unitive state. But that got more and more difficult. And after 2 months, I was no longer able to bring myself back into that unitive state. So what it did is it created this after effect in me of this incredible yearning. I mean, that's what I wanted. That's what I knew was all of our destiny. And I knew it was possible for a mere mortal like me to have unitive communion. It's not just yogis who've been meditating for 40 years in the Himalayas, that it can happen to ordinary people like me, just this little doctor working in Toronto. It created this huge yearning in me. And I knew that the source of happiness was not on the outside. It would come in the inside through my state of consciousness. And I also knew that I had to intentionally practice surrender and non-attachment, which is letting go of my emotional attachments to what happens in the world, because this was necessary for me to reach that place of mental stillness within. And that it's only in that state of mental stillness that I could hopefully once again access that incredible union. My life affirmation after that became, thy will, not my will, be done. Well, then in 2003, when I was 50, I had another near-death experience, my fifth near-death experience, because I had two in my childhood that I didn't describe today, which changed me again, and yet in another way. And what happened in 2003 is I had a slip and fall accident on black ice in Niagara Falls. I fell backwards, hit my head on the rock pavement, and I instantly died from a serious traumatic brain injury. I felt myself whisked out of my body. I was rushed by a force greater than myself up through this, again, it was a dark blue expanse of space, up to this white light realm. I knew where I was going. I wanted to go there. And I was welcomed into this realm by two loving beings of light. And they telepathically communicated with me. And I instantly recognized who they were. They were two saints from my spiritual tradition, Paramahansa Yogananda and Mahavatar Babaji, in their light bodies. And they telepathically, without words, sort of by direct transmission of understanding, informed me that my physical body had died, that my work in the incarnation as Dr. Yvonne Kason was completed. And I felt incredible joy, this wonderful welcome, the unconditional love of the higher power. And I entered a state of consciousness. Some people have said maybe it was cosmic consciousness. I don't know. It's difficult to label it. But I went into the state of consciousness where it seemed like if my consciousness capacity while I was incarnated was like a Pentium 4, that now my consciousness was functioning at a Pentium 100. And I was capable of processing, assimilating vast amounts of information compared to what I can in the embodied form. And what I experienced, it was not a download. It was a different experience. I experienced remembering. So it was an experience of remembering all my past lives, as if those data files had been shut down and now they were turned on. And oh yeah, how could I have forgotten? And it was a wonderful aha experience, because suddenly I knew who I was from the context of many, many lifetimes. And all of a sudden, my incarnation as Dr. Yvonne Kason made incredible sense to me. Anyway, I won't digress on that because I want to make sure we can get to the focus of today's talk, which is the spiritual life stages. But it was a profound experience on the other side. After a period of timeless time, the beings of light reappeared to me and telepathically communicated to me that I may now choose either to reincarnate in the body of a baby to further serve the divine, and or to return to the injured form. And immediately my heart, that was just wide open in a state of love, surrender, trust, cosmic oneness, just immediately responded, "Oh, masters, please guide me. What is the higher choice? I want to do God's will." And so lovingly, so exquisitely sweetly. I mean, how a thought can have that exquisite sweetness, it's impossible to describe on our plane, but with exquisite sweetness and love, they telepathically communicated to me, it'll be more difficult, but to return to the maimed form. And instantly, no details were given to me. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't say, what do you mean more difficult? It's just my heart totally accepted and trusted the wisdom of the divine plan. And I immediately intuitively communicated, I accept, and boom, faster than the speed of thought. Suddenly I found myself back in my body, gasping air into my previously dead body. But I came into a body that was injured with a serious traumatic brain injury. And I went to neuro rehab for 7 years, trying to get back to being able to do my beloved work of writing and talking about STEs and counseling STE experiencers. But I had to accept that for whatever reason, I was disabled now and I could not function in the world. And I was changed, not only physically, but also spiritually. I mean, for many years, I struggled, and, we can talk about this later, maybe, and even went through some dark night of the soul's experience in terms of why would I become disabled when I so loved the work I was doing and I felt I was being of spiritual service in the outer world. But slowly I realized that no, my focus now had to be inwards. How I could serve is through my meditations and my prayers for others. It was about spiritual being rather than about spiritual doing. I had lost the ability to do, but I'd not lost the ability to be spiritual. So I accepted that that was how my life was going to be. I would serve through my prayer and meditation, nothing out in the world. Then suddenly, 12 years later, Spirit had a surprise for me. I had another very powerful STE in 2016 when I was meditating at the Self-Realization Fellowship Retreat in Encinitas, California, in a spot where Paramahansa Yogananda used to commune with God and go into great samadhi experiences, a spiritual power spot on the planet. When I was meditating there, all of a sudden I inwardly perceived an eruption of light, like a liquid fountain of light in the center of my brain. And it subjectively felt like I woke up. like the center part of my brain had been asleep for 12 years and it suddenly woke up and my brain was healed. And I was given the very strong inner message, pass on what you have learned. And I regard this as a combination of a miracle of brain neuroplasticity. Brains can heal, even though medical science is not so certain of that. But ultimately, I think it was the grace of God. The good Lord wanted me to do more work on the planet. So I am now passing on what I have learned. So this changed me into a new life stage. And yes, I coined the phrase spiritually transformative experiences back in the 90s. So after this healing, I'm now out beating the drum again. Yes, there are these types of spiritually transformative experiences. These are normal, these are healthy, these are part of a long-term spiritual transformation process. And I write about them in great detail. This is the first book I wrote after my brain healing, Touched by the Light. I give over 100 case examples of different kinds of STEs. But I wondered over the years, and now we're getting to the theme of today's talk, which is, what is the goal of all of this? Like, certainly there must be some higher purpose. It's not just random STEs happening to people. Like, what is the purpose of this long-term purpose of the spiritual transformation of consciousness? So as I was reading different scholars, mystics over the years, different traditions, I found, yes, other people had thought about this and they'd come up with different ways of describing what the long-term goal of the spiritual awakening process is. And Dr. Richard Maurice Buck, Canadian psychiatrist who himself had a near-death experience, said he called the goal cosmic consciousness. And he thought it was the evolutionary goal ultimately for all of humanity. Evelyn Underhill, who is a scholar and I believe mystic in England, she studied Christian mystics and wrote a wonderful book, Mysticism. And she called the long-term goal of the spiritual transformation process unitive consciousness. Now you can see here, they're talking about the same thing, but using different words. Gopi Krishna, in his various books, he called the goal higher consciousness. And in my studies of yoga and various yogic traditions, the goal is called nirvikalpa samadhi, or ongoing mystical union. And in popular term in today's society, they say the goal is entering the fifth dimension. But, here we are, you and I sitting here at this conference, wherever we're located on the planet. And it seems so far off, it seems a big jump from where we are right now to this goal of cosmic consciousness or nirvikalpa samadhi. So I thought, are there not models for the steps along the way? Are there not roadmaps to help us along the way, make sure we're headed the right direction? And as I looked for different models for stages on the path, and this was particularly important to me because I was counseling people and I wanted to be able to give them a bit of a roadmap to understand what they're experiencing and where they're heading. And Evelyn Underhill, in her work, she talks about the mystic way, definite stages, a progression of stages that mystics go through in her study historically of mystics. In yoga, another model I found that was quite useful was the chakra model, cleansing the chakras, as Swami Brahmananda said this morning, doing them sequentially. And sometimes we have to go up and down, getting issues in the various chakras. I actually used that model for many years in helping patients. But then I found this beautiful model of Swami Sri Yukteswar. It's called Purification of the Heart for stages on the spiritual path. And when I found it, I just loved it because I thought, now this is a model that can relate to anyone from any spiritual tradition. It's not Christian, it's not yoga, it's universal. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. But it comes from this book written by Swami Sri Yukteswar, The Holy Science. Swami Sri Yukteswar was the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda, and he was a fully enlightened spiritual master. And he, in his book, outlines 5 stages for purifying the heart, which are integral to the spiritual path for any person, regardless of what type of spiritual path or tradition that they're following. Now, I'm going to go into detail into all these 5 stages, but I just wanted to show you the overview to begin. So the first stage that according to Swami Sri Yukteswar, that most of humanity is at when they incarnate at this present time is the dark heart stage. And at the dark heart stage, we are unawakened or spiritually asleep. And I love this image of the heart with his or her eyes closed, snoring away, sound asleep. That they think they're awake, right? But actually, spiritually, their heart center is asleep. And this is the stage of spiritual and psychological development before somebody has a spiritual awakening. And unfortunately, it's very prevalent in the world right now. So it's very common. Mainstream society is before the spiritual awakening. And in the dark heart stage, according to Swami Sri Yukteswar, this is the materialistic stage, right? Where the only reality, according to someone in the dark heart stage, is the physical dimension, what we can see here and now, that we die when our physical body dies. And that is typical, that type of thinking, materialistic thinking, is typical of the dark heart stage. Selfishness and self-centeredness is also typical of the dark heart stage because, people are not thinking about spiritual consequences or sequelae of their actions. So they're focusing on self-satisfaction. They're focusing on sex. They're focusing on drugs, to have a drug high. They're focusing on accumulation of money, on accumulation of material possessions, on being of power. But these are all characteristics in the dark heart stage. There's an absence of light. So there's an absence of spiritual light. The eyes are shut. There's an absence of spiritual wisdom. They have not yet had a spiritual awakening experience. And in the dark heart stage, people are in denial. And in yoga, there's a very, very beautiful word called avidya. And what it means is they are not aware. And it's like somebody who's never been to an ocean and nobody's told them, is not aware that the water in the ocean is salty because he's only experienced fresh water. So it's not that he's stupid, because he could be very intelligent, but he's simply unaware because he's not yet aware of this truth, that he's not yet had a direct experience of this reality. So emotional denial in the sense of people are unaware of the spiritual realm, but they're also unaware of psychological issues. And this can be very frustrating sometimes when you're dealing with someone in the dark heart state, because they think, oh, psychological issues, shadow work, recovery work, oh, that's all bull roar. That they don't even, some don't even understand the idea of having an emotional issue. They think it's all just new age fluffy duffy. And people at the dark heart stage are also tend to be into fear motivation. And this type of consciousness, a lot of fear motivation, emotionality, anger, manipulating through anger, and at its lowest form, even cruelty. Lots of rationalizing, making excuses for your behavior. You're never wrong. It's always the other person's fault. This is the type of mentality at the dark heart stage. And someone can be very religious at the dark heart stage. They might have been raised in a particular religion and they've been indoctrinated, or even you could say brainwashed into a certain way of thinking. But as Reverend Norma said in our earlier presentation, because they're so unaware, people at the dark heart stage misinterpret the truths, and they misunderstand the truths that are the spiritual truths that are the gems that are in the scriptures of the great prophets and mystics. And so there's much misunderstanding of spiritual truths, even by organized religious organizations, if they're still at the dark heart stage and have not had a spiritual awakening. And people at the dark heart stage are also unaware that they are spiritual beings, and therefore unaware that there's a higher spiritual purpose of life for our spiritual learning and growth, and to finally grow into a place where we can find our way back home. Now, in yoga, they have this beautiful model of the yugas, or the spiritual ages, that according to yogic science, and they combine it with astrology, that they say all of humanity is going through these spiritual stages. And that there was a time, a long time ago, here it says 1150, 500 BC, where we were much more spiritually advanced as human beings. But over the thousands and thousands of years, the spiritual knowledge was lost, and we entered what was the darkest time, where there was the least spiritual awareness. And in yoga, this is called the Kali Yuga. And Jesus Christ was actually incarnated during the Kali Yuga. And some sages interpret that this was a gift from God at a time that light was really, really needed on the planet. There have been gifts from God in many cultures and many civilizations. I'm not saying that Jesus was the only one, but he was born in the Kali Yuga to bring light. And supposedly, according to the yogic tradition, Kali Yuga ended about 1700, and we're now on this upswing. The present day is over here, so we're about 300 years into the Dwapara Yuga. And so there are still a lot of like leftovers from the Kali Yuga in our society, that as we're starting to awaken, as we are spiritually starting to have more light on the planet, that we're going to have to break away and change and let go of things that don't work anymore, ways of being. But that is why it's so prominent in our society, that the Kali Yuga was the dark age, when, you know, virtually everybody was in the dark heart stage of consciousness. Now, what happens after a spiritual awakening? So after a spiritual awakening, we go into the next spiritual stage, which Swami Sri Yukteswar calls the propelled heart stage. And this is the stage of searching, of learning, of embracing our recovery work and personal psychological healing. And I loved this image of the running heart when I found it, because I thought, this depicts the essence of the propelled heart stage. Eyes are not shut anymore. Eyes are wide open. And a person at the propelled heart stage is also feeling an inner joy at discovering, wow, there's much more to life than I realized. And they're on the move. This is the time of the spiritual quest. So in the propelled heart stage, for me, it came after my plane crash near-death experience. I told you how I just was on a quest for years. I mean, my library is full of books I read while I was researching during my quest. But people will learn and try to seek deeper understanding. And they might start by their own particular religious upbringing. If they were raised in a particular religious tradition, they might suddenly start researching deeper in that tradition, as I did, and starting to read about the mystics in their tradition, and you know, the sacred knowledge in their tradition. And or they may then start searching in other spiritual traditions, because then that happened to me. I started reading, well, let's start reading about yogic mystical traditions, and the Jewish mystical tradition, and the Buddhist mystical tradition, and Native Indian mystical traditions. So this is very common and normal and healthy in the propelled heart stage, that we are seeking understanding in different places. We may study with different teachers over the years. You know, we might study with a teacher in one tradition for a number of years and then find another teacher that resonates to our heart, or we might even change to a slightly different tradition, or we might be studying from two traditions at the same time, or doing practices from more than one tradition at the same time. This is all part of the propelled heart stage of learning, of growing, and recovery. So this is the other thing that we're doing in the propelled heart stage, is that we start getting ourselves in shape. Like this heart is running, starting to get ourselves in shape. And this means getting ourselves in shape in body, mind, and spirit. Every level is important. So when the propelled heart stage is often when people start looking after themselves, like, gee, maybe I should go on a fitness program. And, I'm really going to try to quit smoking, or, I'm finally going to go into recovery for my drug addiction or for my alcoholism. Or they start their trying to live by spiritual laws, consciously trying to live by spiritual laws, self-development, purification, starting to do self-reflection. Gee, maybe I'm responsible for some of the problems in my life. Maybe I'm just not a perpetual victim. Maybe I have something to contribute to it. So people start doing their recovery work, their self-reflection, inner child healing. The psychological healing is embraced. It's understood and embraced. People start taking responsibility for their mental health, for their physical health, for their spiritual health. And the other thing is that people discover powerful tools to help them when they're in the propelled heart stage, such as prayers that are very powerful for them. For example, the serenity prayer: God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that can become like a mantra for people. I find other prayers that very, very helpful and healing as they're in this propelled heart stage. Affirmations, people discover at this stage the power of affirmations and start using positive affirmations, positive thinking. Same with visualizations, using positive visualization, positive thinking. This is the stage where people discover body work, that maybe body work, yoga, Tai Chi, all of this can help me loosen up and get more connected with my body, with my spirit, with my psyche. Journaling, people discover journaling and dream analysis in the propelled heart stage. Another interesting thing that happens during this stage is purgation. And what purgation is it's a spontaneous surfacing of forgotten memories. And these can be forgotten memories from our life up until this point that we forgot about. Oh, this is something I'm going to have to deal with and heal. But also past life memories may start surfacing spontaneously. And we realize, oh, I've got past life baggage that I have to heal and deal with in addition to issues from this lifetime. Now, according to Swami Sri Yukteswar, and also I've observed this in my counseling of experiencers over the years, the propelled heart stage can be a very long stage. And people may be on this for the rest of their lifetime. That may, and that's necessary. They need to do what they need to do. And it can even continue into the next lifetime. But challenges and suffering may occur as we're going through the propelled heart stage because we are changing. See, this heart is moving. He is changing. She is changing. And maybe those around us, our previous friends, our previous family, maybe our previous jobs, maybe they don't fit anymore as we're changing. And so this can be very painful sometimes as we have to let go of things that don't fit anymore because we are changing. Now, Dwapara Yuga is the yuga that comes after Kali Yuga, and that's the age, the spiritual age that we're in right now. And according to yoga, this is the so-called electrical age, and it's also the propelled heart age. So this is the time of spiritual awakening. So guess what, guys? We are doing exactly what, according to the yogic cycles, we are meant to do at this time in human evolution. We are awakening spiritually. Perhaps we're the crest of the wave and more people will be following behind us. I hope that is the truth. And this being the electrical age, this has a very interesting, deeper understanding Because according to yoga science, that during the Dwapara Yuga, we are discovering during our spiritual awakenings that about inner and outer electricities. That's why it's also called the electrical age. And if you think on the outer physical plane, all of the electricities that have been discovered since the Dark Ages ended and the Renaissance, and then all of a sudden we've discovered electricity and radio and television and laser and the internet and gravity and all sorts of energies that we've discovered. The electricities, even the electricities in the body and the circulation of the body. But in addition to these physical electricities, that according to yoga science, this is also the time that the inner electricities are being discovered. I mean, they were always there. We just didn't know about them. But now with our spiritual awakenings, we're discovering them, and more people are realizing, wow, there are inner electricities like the prana or the life energy, or what in Buddhism is called the chi, the meridians or the nadis, as they're called in yoga, the channels that this life energy flows in our bodies, the chakras, the energy centers going up the spine for the flow of the life energy prana, the kundalini energy that we heard about this morning that can activate to accelerate our spiritual transformation process, about the astral body, the energy body. These are all things that we're becoming more aware of as we're awakening in the Dwapara Yuga. So what we're doing at Spiritual Awakenings International, I like to think of us as the crest of the wave, bringing out awareness about the inner outer electricities, and that this is the time of spiritual awakening. Now, after being on the propelled heart stage for some period of time, later in the propelled heart stage, our heart keeps opening as we're going through and learning and studying and doing some spiritual practices. Now, most of people have discovered some spiritual practices that resonate with them by this point. And humility starts developing, that people start becoming more and more humble. And they discover that we actually need each other in order to learn and grow. And people become more able to work with other people, to work together. This idea of working as a team, become to treasure and value others' opinions, to have the humility to realize, I can learn from other people. I can learn from other people's opinions. So there's this shifting that starts happening towards the end of the late propelled heart stage. And the other thing that happens towards the end of this stage is that the soul call to God increases. We want clarity about our spiritual path. It's like, God, I've tried out so many paths. I've read so many books. I've tried different practices. Please show me, what is my path? And I remember when I was at this stage myself, I remember I was praying at one point because a whole bunch of people said to me from different traditions, Yvonne, if you're really going to have success in your spiritual search, you need to have a guru. And I thought, I was sort of adverse to spiritual groups, having been burned by some negative experiences earlier in my life. And I was trying to do this on my own. And so, but I wondered, is this true? Do I need a guru? If I do need a guru, who is my guru? And so I actually started praying to God, because I always felt my relationship was direct with God ever since that experience in the light in the plane crash. God, please guide me. Please guide me. If I do have a guru, please make it absolutely clear to me who it is. Please guide me. Well, my prayers did get answered. The next stage that one grows into, and this can sometimes be sort of a sliding scale that we're sort of moving into it. So we're somewhat on the propelled heart stage and somewhat on the steady heart stage. It isn't like a night and day shift. But what happens as we move into the next spiritual stage, according to Swami Sri Yukteswar, is that our focus now changes from me to we, from I am learning, I am searching, I am healing, I'm in recovery, to we are learning, we are growing, we are healing, we are spiritual awakening, we are a global community, we are here to help each other. And people become much more humble and respectful, and compassion increases dramatically, because we feel we're part of a collective spiritual family. We are all one. We are all on this journey together. And service to others becomes a priority. And this can be a very marked change in people's lives, that people around them who are not in a spiritual awakening, they wonder, what is this with you? Why are you doing all of this volunteer work? I mean, why are you not out there trying to earn more money? Why are you spending your time doing volunteer work? This is part of the spiritual unfoldment process. When we reach the steady heart stage, service to others is our heart's passion. We want to be of service to others. And the other thing that happens at the steady heart stage, in addition to service to others now becoming a central part of our lives, is our spiritual path becomes clear. And we commit to that spiritual path and deepen in our practices on that path. And Yogananda describes this very beautifully. He says, when we're at the propelled heart stage, we should drink from a lot of spiritual wells, sample from a lot of spiritual wells, and taste that water from that spiritual well. Does it resonate with your soul? Is it nourishing you? But he says, once you find the well that resonates with your soul as the spiritual path that is calling you home, don't go around sampling anymore. Commit to drinking deeply of that well. And I found that happened within me. Once I got clarity of my spiritual path, although I continued to learn and honor the teachings that I heard from other traditions, I became clear on what my path is. I'm a Christian yogi. I'm a practitioner of Kriya Yoga, and I embrace that path very, very deeply. So we deepen our practice on the path that resonates with our soul. Service is central in our lives. But the earlier tasks of the earlier purification process and purgation, that they continue. That never stops. It's like an accumulative adding upon each other. So it's not that we stop learning or we stop doing our healing and recovery work. No, we continue to do that. Now that's become a part of who we are. We do that naturally. We self-reflect, we journal. We add to it now this next layer as the heart is opening of service to others. That in addition to our inner work and our spiritual practice, serving others is central to who we are when we reach the steady heart stage. And I know many of you that are here in Spiritual Awakenings International are on this stage, doing this stage of the spiritual path, giving selflessly a volunteer service, that just your soul on the steady heart stage, it's like craves to do service, to be of service to others. But guess what? That's the third stage. There is still a fourth stage and the fifth stage. So the fourth stage on this roadmap of the spiritual path is what Swami Sri Yukteswar calls the devoted heart stage. And the devoted heart stage is characterized by surrender to the divine will, detachment from emotionality and emotional attachments, and devotion, love for the higher power divine, however we understand it. And by the time somebody reaches the devoted heart stage, they have had many, many glimpses, usually many STEs or many deep meditation experiences. So they've come to the understanding, the realization by their own direct experience, not by book learning, through their own direct experience, they have realized that true happiness, the happiness they are looking for in their soul, is on the inside, within their own consciousness, is how they're going to access it. It is not dependent on events that happen in the outer world. So at the devoted heart stage, surrender is embraced, because the devotee, which is what a person at the devoted heart stage is sometimes called, realizes that in order to get to, shall we call it, the happy place within, it is in the still place within. We have to be able to rise above the ruffling emotionality that gets us pulled down into our lower chakras, let go of that, and rise up into the stillness. And if we can detach from our ego desires, let go, and rise above, that we can reach that point of inner stillness. And then that is the portal to divine communion. As I mentioned earlier, thy will be done, not my will, becomes a mantra at this stage. And devotion increases the passion, the desire to spend time in prayer, in meditation, in spiritual study, on spiritual retreats. A person at the devoted heart stage may have very strong yearning to go on long retreats, for 2 months retreats, for, even to go live in an ashram for 6 months or a year. Or maybe they might decide to give up the worldly life and become a renunciant, become a nun or monk. That these sorts of shifts to an inner life can happen to people, or they feel the urge to stay in the world, but have the need to spend more time in prayer and meditation and to do regular meditation retreats. And that is what happened to me, the need to go on regular, long meditation retreats. The other thing that develops at the the devoted heart stage is the devotee has intense yearning, a yearning to commune with God, a yearning to be one with God, a yearning to stay in that communion, a yearning to be God's instrument. Now, I'm going to move now to the next stage, but I want to mention that many glimpses, deep experiences happen at the devoted heart stage. They are becoming a clearer and clearer instrument of the divine. But dark night of the soul, which was mentioned earlier on, or ego death, can also occur at these periods, this stage, periods where there are no STEs. After having many blissful, ecstatic experiences, suddenly darkness, nothing, dry spells. And this happened to me after my traumatic brain injury. And for me, they say sometimes in yoga that it's a test, the dark night of the soul. Will you cling to your love for God and your practices, even when you're not getting any of the rewards, you're not getting any of the bliss or STEs? And I had to just cling to that faithfully and my spiritual practices until they started coming back to me again. Now, very quickly, I'm going to tell you about the next stage. We only have a few minutes left, but it is called the clean heart stage. And this is when complete surrender, ego death occurs, that divine communion begins. And the focus, once an adept is able to achieve divine communion, becomes deepening in that communion. And in that unitive state, being of selfless service to others by sharing their divine presence. In the clean heart stage, inner reality has become stronger than outer reality. Duality dissolves. They live in a sense of non-duality, not because they want to think it, but they're actually experiencing it. They do not perceive themselves as separate from spirit. And first, this usually manifests as intermittent periods of unitive consciousness, just as Swami Brahmananda described to us this morning that he had. But then the more advanced stages are ongoing unitive consciousness. And according to the yogic tradition, even when we reach ongoing unitive consciousness, which is a very high wonderful, blessed spiritual state called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but it has 3 progressive levels. And these have been paraphrased into English as first cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness, and God consciousness. And I'm not capable of giving you a description of these. I'm not advanced enough to do that. But just so that we know that we have a long road ahead of us, but it's a beautiful road and there is a roadmap. The person at this stage radiates divine presence just in their essence. They're selfless. They offer their actions, whether it be meditative actions or out in the world actions, selflessly to benefit others. And they just share and radiate their divine presence. Now, just in summary, as I wrap up here, according to this model of purifying the heart, there are 5 stages: the dark heart stage of the unawakened, the propelled heart stage of on the road, we're awakened, we're searching, we're learning, the steady heart stage where we start committing to the one path that resonates with our soul, and service becomes a central point in our lives. And then moving onward, the devoted heart stage is where we are striving to let go of our ego desires, to detach, to rise above. And we have a strong spiritual yearning for communion. And clean heart stage is when we're actually blessedly now achieving communion. And this focus is to go deeper in the communion and through our radiance to serve others. So I want to mention it's important to be aware of the changing focuses on the spiritual path, that searching and trying out different things is normal and very necessary on the repelled heart stage. And you might be on that for your whole lifetime. Don't judge yourselves or others. That, your heart needs to search as long as it needs to search. But on the steady heart stage, serving to others is very, very important. And sometimes people are judged by they want to volunteer so much, but that is part of the steady heart stage. And psycho-spiritual house cleaning is essential at every single stage, at any stage. A seeker may slip. There may be a spiritual issue that raises its head. So how do we promote a healthy spiritual awakening? Strive for self-improvement, strive for compassion, humility, try to live a balanced lifestyle, lead an honest, ethical life, follow spiritual and moral guidelines, be of service to others, and meditate and pray daily to deepen. Meditation is the key. So these are my 2 new books. I'm now going to stop screen sharing, and I would be very happy to answer anybody's questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kason. You just did a great job. You hit it out of the park. Look, I've got a couple of questions, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Regarding your medical practice in Canada, did you feel when you started to treat individuals who experienced STEs in the 1990s that you were doing a groundbreaking treatment?
Well, thank you for that question. I would answer that as yes and no. That I realized that there were not other doctors in Canada doing this. So I knew that this was groundbreaking in that sense. And trust me, I did have to deal with some challenges from the medical profession to launch a new specialty. But fortunately, I had the opportunity to travel, and I was going to California regularly, and I met people from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, and I was introduced to Spiritual Emergence Network, and I realized that there were other people around the world, even if they weren't in Toronto, Canada, who were also trying to pioneer this field. So I felt like I was part of a team on the planet, that somehow spirit brought us together. We weren't a big team, but we were a few people and we were able to support each other and help each other, because we were all learning, how do you support somebody who's going through a spiritual awakening? So we were learning together, and we were all experiencers too, which was, we were learning through our own experiences, as well as from each other, as well as from our patients, as well as from what we were studying in the sacred scriptures.
Well, here's a question from Ken. Are these 5 stages linear, or do they overlap? Or is the upward spiral a description? Example, we can return to earlier stages at different levels while also experiencing aspects of more advanced stages.
Yes, thank you for that really wonderful question, Ken. And I think the last, your last suggestion is how I'm experiencing it. I'm seeing other people experiencing it. So let me try and explain it this way. It's like when you're going to school and you're learning mathematics in grade 1 and 2 and 3 and spelling in grade 3, 4, and 5. Then you get on to high school and then to university later on. You don't have to learn that math or learn that spelling again because you've already learned it. But you're still using those skills as you go on to your higher education. So that is how I have experienced and how I understand these spiritual life path stages. So the stage of self-reflection, doing our inner work, that actually never stops. That it just becomes, we've learned to do that now. It's now a part of who we are. That as we move on to the next stage, which would be the steady heart stage, we're now on top of that. We have the strong compulsion to be of service, and we have now discovered our path. So we are drinking deeply of that path, but we're still doing our inner work that we were doing, that we started doing. It's now become a habit from the earlier stage. Then when we move on to the devoted heart stage, we have the strong inner yearning to meditate, to detach from our emotions, to rise above, but we're still serving. We're still doing the tasks of the steady heart stage. We're still serving all the time. It's still a huge part of our life. That's become a part of our life now. It's not the cusp of learning for us. That's a part of our life. Our cusp of learning now is about going deeper, rising above emotionality, learning to, come down the chakra system, deal with emotional issues as they come up, and then continue with our service, and then let go and rise into the stillness so we can go into deeper states of consciousness. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that was a great answer. This is from AJ. Great talk. Did it take long for the medical community to accept the new term STE? And how did you feel now that it has become a common term?
Thank you for the question, AJ. I was very, very blessed in that I would say the divine plan set it up in such a way that when I had specialized my practice in STEs, which was back in the early 90s, that I had already established myself in the medical community throughout the 80s. I had had a very successful career. I had a very successful teaching position at the University of Toronto, and I had various leadership positions. So when I specialized my practice, I had that behind me. So people knew, we know she's not a flake. She's done all this other stuff that we recognize her for as a solid physician. And I really tried to pitch it to the medical profession in a way that other doctors, nurses, social workers, healthcare professionals could understand. And I put it forward in a way of, this is something that's happening to our patients. And most healthcare providers have got good hearts. That's why they go into being a healthcare provider. They want to help people. And so, when I point out people are having these experiences, they will want to talk to a healthcare provider. It's important that you understand about this so that you can help them. And what was really interesting to me, it's an interesting phenomenon that some of you might relate to, is that what I found, it was often not the doctor that people would talk to. They'd have their near-death experience and they'd feel comfortable speaking to the cleaning lady or the person who came in and delivered the food, or sometimes to the nurse. But it seemed like the doctor was one of the last people to be told. But as doctors made it clear to their patients that they were open and willing to talk about these experiences, many doctors told me that more and more of their patients started opening up to them. And then that is what convinced doctors, AJ. It wasn't me and my talk that convinced them. It was actually hearing their patients tell them their stories of their STEs. And I think that's how the truth is going out. People hearing experiencers realize, oh my gosh, this is true.
Well, the questions are really starting to come in now. Here's one from Diane. Which of your books is based on this talk?
My most recent book, which is called Touched by the Soul Lessons from Light. There it is. That is my own personal spiritual awakening journey. And chapter 19 is when I go into this whole model of purifying the heart and how I felt that my STEs put me through these different life stages over the years.
This is from Tim. Do you think we can reach full enlightenment in this lifetime if we dedicate ourselves seriously and fully to that quest?
Yes, I can answer that. Yes. I think it is possible, but I also think it has to do not only with our personal spiritual effort in this lifetime. I think it also has to do with the spiritual effort we've made in past lives, whatever sort of unresolved karma or issues we might be bringing with us from past lives. So of course, we don't know what it is. You might be this close to enlightenment right now. You don't know it. But, another thing Paramahansa Yogananda said was that 25% is your own personal spiritual effort. So your responsibility is you make 100% of your 25% spiritual effort. And 25% is the blessing of a guru. Now, some of you might say, but I don't have a guru. Well, how I look at it is this way: we do, whether we realize it or not. If you're following a Christian path, then Jesus is your guru, whether you call him your guru or not. And maybe you have a guru from a past life that you don't even know about who's helping you from the other side. And, if you're following Judaism, I don't know, but perhaps it would be Moses or Abraham that is your guru. So whoever is invisibly helping you from the other side, the ascended masters of your particular tradition, or if you want to call it your guardian angels, whatever, but 25% is help from the other side. But 50% is the grace of God. And I find that very humbling, but in my own life, I have experienced the grace of God. That brain healing that I had, 12 years after my brain injury, it convinced me anything can happen, miracles can happen, and it can happen to anybody. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. So Tim, never give up. That's my message. Never give up. Miracles do happen. If 50% is the grace of God, then who knows? It's possible.
This will be the last question because we're running out of time. This is from Catherine. Yvonne, a wonderful presentation. Humans have pushed Earth into climate crisis. This seems like it would be a stage at the early Kali Yuga versus early Dwapara Yoga of now. With the level of crisis, it seems like it will be almost impossible to heal at such high levels that is needed. Your thoughts on this?
Okay. I'm going to talk about it in terms of all the different crises, plural, that are happening in the world right now. One of the things that happens as we're awakening is that the shadow gets exposed. And how I look at it is the light awakens within us, and then the inner house, the stuff was down there before, but we didn't realize those issues were there until the light Sean down there, and we go, oops, there's cobwebs in the corner that we have to deal with. So that happens on an individual basis when we're going through our spiritual awakening, that we discover that we have cobwebs in our inner corners that need to be dealt with. But it's also happening collectively on the planet, is that all sorts of stuff, all sorts of crises, all sorts of cruelties, all sorts of atrocities. I don't want to dwell on the negative, but they have happened throughout Dwapara, throughout Kali Yuga, throughout the history. But we didn't know about it. Okay, we didn't know about it because it wasn't in the light. And what's happening now is through modern technology, through Zoom, through television, through internet, through Facebook, through Twitter, through all of these modalities, through YouTube, the information is getting out there. We are now aware, if something catastrophic happens on the other end of the planet, we know about it. Sometimes we know about it live. It's even being televised. And you see, that hasn't happened until now. And so it might give you the impression that, gosh, there's more disasters happening now than used to. I'm not convinced that's true. I think we're more aware about what's happening in the world. And with that awareness, we can then help. And that's why it's important that we're becoming more aware of what's happening both inwardly and outwardly, that we can help in whatever ways, in what particular little corner the good Lord has placed you, to help raise awareness, help heal issues, help raise consciousness.
Yvonne, you hit it out of the park. Thank you so much for a great presentation. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.